The fear was not human. It was a thin, high, and utterly alien terror, a soundless scream that vibrated in the very structure of the ship. The observer, designated by a complex series of tonal shifts that meant something like third navigator of the veil, felt its 3 hearts hammer against its cartilage ribcage. It had never known this sensation before. Not in the stellar nurseries of Cygnus, not in the black holes at the galactic core, not even when it had faced the psychic leviathans of the Andromedan void. But now, fear was a cold fluid pouring through its circulatory system. The source of the terror was the small creature on the table. A human child, a male, approximately 7 solar cycles of its home world. Its name was Leo. It was unconscious, its soft, fleshy face placid, a stark contrast to the storm they had just witnessed inside its undeveloped mind. They had chosen this specimen at random, a lone vehicle on a dark, rural transit path. The protocols were simple, efficient. Disable the vehicle. Pacify the occupants. Extract one for a brief, non-invasive scan. Return it with memory wiped, leaving behind nothing but a few hours of missing time, and a vague sense of unease. They had done this 1,000 times on 100 different worlds. It was routine. It was data collection. Until now. The scan had begun as expected. Basic biology, simple neural pathways firing with dreams of running in fields and the taste of sweet things. Then the probe had brushed against something deeper. A latent structure. A potentiality buried in the species' genetic code, waiting for a trigger. In this specific child, for reasons they could not fathom, the potentiality was not dormant, it was budding. The machine, a consciousness in its own right, had translated the potential into a projection, a simulation of what this child, and by extension its species, could become. And that was when the silent screaming began. The projection showed them a future, not of centuries, but of millennia. It showed them starships, not like their own elegant silent vessels that rode the currents of space-time, but brutal, angular things of metal and fire. They swarmed from the child's small blue world like hornets from a kick nest. They did not explore, they did not seek to understand, they conquered. They saw humanity spread, not with the grace of a spreading vine, but with the consuming hunger of a firestorm. They saw worlds of breathtaking beauty turned to glass. They saw ancient, peaceful civilizations, beings of pure thought and crystalline form, shattered and dissected, their knowledge plundered, their existence erased. The humans in the vision were not monsters in the classical sense. They were not driven by simple malice. They were driven by a terrifying absolute certainty in their own righteousness. A belief that the chaos of the universe needed a firm, guiding hand, and that hand was theirs. They brought order, the order of the grave. And at the heart of it all, the nexus of this galactic imperium, was the mind of the child. Not Leo as a man, but the pattern of his thought. A unique blend of empathy and ruthlessness, of creativity and destructive logic. He would devise ways to save his own people from disease and famine by sacrificing 1,000,000 other species without a second thought. He would weep at the death of a pet while ordering the sterilization of a planet. This paradox was the key. It was the engine of their horrifyingly efficient expansion. They would love their own, so fiercely they would burn the galaxy to keep them safe. The third navigator of the Veil looked at its commander. The commander's usually iridescent skin was a dull, sickly gray. Its breathing stalks were retracted in a gesture of profound shock. "Release it," The commander projected, its thought form trembling. Put it back now. Wipe the memory. Wipe ours if you can. We saw nothing. We were never here. Commander, the third navigator projected back, its own thoughts ragged. The potential. It is not just in the child. It is in the species. We have a duty to report. The concordance must be warned. The commander turned its large black eyes towards the small boy on the table. The vision was seared into its mind. 1 billion suns extinguished, not in anger, but as a matter of cold, pragmatic policy. The silence of 1,000 worlds, their songs and histories gone forever. Warn them of what? The commander projected, its thought a whisper of pure dread, that we found a child who will dream of empire. They will laugh, they will not understand. You cannot explain this horror. You can only see it. The commander floated closer to the control panel. We are leaving. We will designate this entire sector of space as a void, forbidden, unknowable. We will erase our logs. We will forget. It is the only way. The third navigator felt a tremor as the ship's systems prepared to return the child. It watched as a delicate manipulator, arm gently lifted the small, fragile body. This creature, this Leo, who weighed less than one of the ship's power conduits, held a future that would unmake them all. The fear did not subside. It settled, deep and permanent, like a shard of ice in its hearts. They were not fleeing a monster, they were fleeing a god in its cradle. And they were leaving it right where they found it. Tom Milburn felt the grit of the asphalt under his knees. The air smelled of ozone and damp earth. One minute he was driving, the next he was kneeling on the side of County Road 9, his old Ford pickup, silent and dark a few yards away. The engine was cold, stone cold. "Leo?" he called out, his voice a raw croak. Panic, sharp and metallic, flooded his mouth. "Leo." A small shape stirred in the passenger seat. Leo sat up, blinking slowly, his sandy brown hair sticking up in odd directions. He looked at Tom through the windshield, his expression not of fear, but of mild confusion, like someone waking from a long nap. "Dad?" Leo's voice was small. "Are we there yet?" Relief hit Tom so hard his legs felt weak. He pushed himself up, his joints protesting. He stumbled to the passenger door and pulled it open. He ran his hands over his son, checking for bumps, for cuts, for anything wrong. Leo seemed fine, perfectly fine. Too fine. "What happened, bud? Do you remember anything?" Tom asked, his heart still thumping a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Leo shook his head. "I was sleeping. I had a dream." "A dream?" "About lines," Leo said, his blue eyes distant. "Lots of shiny lines. They went everywhere." Lines. Tom's head was pounding. He remembered the engine sputtering. He remembered the engine sputtering. He remembered pulling over. He remembered a light. Not headlights. A pale, sterile light that seemed to come from everywhere at once, washing out the color of the trees, the road, the world. And then, nothing. Just this. And kneeling on the road. A gap in his memory, smooth and absolute. He checked his watch. It was broken, the hands frozen at 9:17. He pulled out his phone. The screen was black, dead. He tried the truck's ignition again. Nothing, not even a click. It was as if every bit of electricity in a 50-foot radius had been sucked out and thrown away. "Okay, pal," Tom said, forcing a calm he didn't feel. "Looks like we're walking." Harmony Creek was only 2 miles away. The walk was silent, broken only by the chirping of crickets, and the sound of their own footsteps on the cracked pavement. Leo didn't complain. He just held Tom's hand, his small fingers wrapped tight. Usually Leo would be full of questions, a non-stop chatterbox of 7-year-old curiosities. Tonight, he was quiet, deeply, unnervingly quiet. When they finally saw the first street lights of their small town, Tom felt a measure of safety return. It was a false comfort, and he knew it. Whatever had happened out there on the road, it wasn't normal. It wasn't a stalled engine or a faulty alternator. He got them home, into their small rental house that always smelled faintly of sawdust from his job at the lumber mill. He made Leo a cup of hot chocolate, watching him as he sat at the kitchen table. The boy didn't slurp it down like he usually did. He held the mug in both hands, staring into the brown liquid as if it held complex secrets. Later, after tucking him into bed, Tom went into the living room. He sat in his worn-out armchair, the one with the permanent imprint of his body, and tried to piece it together. He was a practical man. He believed in things you could fix with a wrench or a hammer. He did not believe in strange lights or missing time. But belief didn't matter when you were kneeling on cold asphalt with a hole in your evening. He must have dozed off, because he woke with a start to a scratching sound. It was coming from Leo's room. Tom's first thought was a monster under the bed, a childish fear made real by the night's strangeness. He crept down the hallway, his bare feet silent on the worn floorboards. He pushed Leo's door open a crack. Leo wasn't in bed. He was on the floor. A box of crayons spread around him. In the dim glow of his rocket ship nightlight, he was drawing on a large piece of construction paper. His focus was absolute, his small brow furrowed in concentration. The scratching sound was the black crayon, moving with a speed and precision that was not a child's. Tom pushed the door open wider. "Leo? What are you doing up, buddy?" Leo didn't look up. "The lines," he whispered. "I have to get the lines right." Tom stepped into the room and looked down at the drawing. His breath caught in his throat. It was not a house or a dog or a superhero. It was a web of intricate geometric patterns. Circles interwoven with complex polygons, lines intersecting at impossible angles. It looked less like a drawing and more like a circuit diagram, a blueprint for something complex and alien. In the center of the chaotic symmetry, Leo was drawing a small, simple sphere. He colored it in blue and green. "What is that, Leo?" Tom asked, his voice barely a whisper. Leo stopped drawing. He looked up at Tom, his eyes seeming older, wiser and colder than they had any right to be. "It's a map," Leo said, his voice flat and certain, "for a cage." The next morning felt like a lie. The sun came up, birds sang, and the smell of coffee filled the small kitchen. Tom tried to build a wall of normalcy around the previous night. He made pancakes, shaping one like a dinosaur for Leo. It was their Saturday ritual. But the ritual felt hollow, a pantomime of a life that had existed only yesterday. Leo ate his pancake without comment. He didn't make the usual roaring sounds. He just cut it into small, precise squares and ate them one by one. His eyes kept glancing at the junk drawer, the one where Tom threw dead batteries, loose screws, and broken things he meant to fix but never would. "You okay, Chief?" Tom asked, trying to sound casual. Leo nodded, chewing slowly. "The toaster is broken," he said. "It wasn't a question." Tom looked at the toaster. It had been on the fritz for weeks, burning one side of the bread and leaving the other untouched. "Yeah, I know. I need to pick up a new one." "You don't need a new one," Leo said. He slid off his chair, went to the junk drawer and rummaged inside. He pulled out a paperclip and a small dead watch battery. He walked to the toaster, unplugged it, and turned it upside down. With a focus that was deeply unsettling in a 7-year-old, he used the paperclip to pry open a small panel on the bottom. He fiddled with something inside, then carefully placed the dead watch battery against 2 small contacts. There was a faint click. He closed the panel, turned the toaster upright, and plugged it back in. He dropped a slice of bread into it. A few moments later, a perfectly toasted, evenly brown slice popped up. Tom stared. He stared at the toast, then at his son. Leo just looked at him, his expression unreadable. "How did you do that?" Tom asked, his voice tight. "I saw how it works," Leo said simply. "The energy flow was wrong. I corrected it." Energy flow. Corrected it. These were not the words of a first grader. Tom felt a cold dread snake up his spine. The drawing from last night. The toaster. The unnerving quiet. Something had been left inside his son, or maybe something had been unlocked. Later that day they went to the town library. It was an old habit, a way to get out of the house. The library was Tom's sanctuary, a quiet place run by Mrs. Gable, a woman with hair like spun silver and eyes that had seen 70 years of Harmony Creek's secrets. Leo, who usually made a beeline for the picture books about sharks and volcanoes, walked straight to the non-fiction section. Tom watched, baffled, as his son ran his small fingers along the spines of books on quantum physics, celestial mechanics, and advanced metallurgy. He pulled one out. It was a dense university textbook on material science. He opened it and started to read, his lips moving silently. "Find something interesting, Leo?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice soft as she came up behind him. Leo didn't look up from the book. "This is all wrong," he muttered. "The assumptions about tensile strength are based on flawed elemental models. They're missing 3 fundamental particle states." Mrs. Gable blinked. She looked at Tom, a question in her kind eyes. Tom could only offer a weak, helpless shrug. He felt like a man watching a movie of his own life, unable to change the script. "Well," Mrs. Gable said, recovering with a gentle smile, "maybe you can write a new one when you are older." "I don't have to wait," Leo said, turning a page. The book was filled with complex equations. "I already know how it's supposed to be." The walk home was tense. The whispers of the town had not yet started, but Tom could feel them coming. A boy who fixes toasters with paper clips and critiques physics textbooks is not a boy who goes unnoticed in a place like Harmony Creek. The strangeness was leaking out. That evening, Tom sat in the living room, nursing a beer, trying to think. He couldn't go to the police. What would he say? My son was abducted by aliens, and now he's a genius. They'd lock him up. He couldn't talk to a doctor for the same reason. He was alone with this. Utterly alone. He heard a noise from the backyard. He looked through the window. Leo was standing in the middle of the small, patchy lawn. He was staring up at the night sky, his head tilted as if listening to something no one else could hear. Tom went to the back door and opened it. "Leo, it's getting late." Leo didn't turn. He pointed a small finger towards a spot just above the horizon. "They're watching," he said. His voice was not scared. It was matter of fact. "They're scared. They don't know what to do." Tom looked where he was pointing. He saw nothing but the familiar stars. The same pinpricks of light he'd seen his whole life. But a cold certainty washed over him. Leo was right. They weren't alone. The strange, silent visitors from the road were still out there, and they weren't watching the sky. They were watching his son. The first real crack in the facade of normalcy came a week later at the school playground. Tom was picking Leo up, standing by the chain-link fence with the other parents, making small talk about the upcoming town fair. He watched Leo sitting alone on a bench, not playing on the swings or the slide, but scratching patterns in the dirt with a stick. A boy named Kyle Peters, a known bully who was a head taller than every other kid in his grade, swaggered over to Leo. Kyle had a mean streak that was legendary in the Harmony Creek Elementary School yard. "What's that weirdo stuff you are drawing?" Kyle sneered, kicking a spray of dirt over Leo's careful lines. Leo didn't flinch. He just looked up at Kyle, his expression blank. "It is a representation of gravitational lensing around a binary star system." Kyle's face twisted in confusion, then anger. "You think you are so smart?" He shoved Leo, not hard, but enough to make him stumble off the bench. "Weirdo." Tom started forward, his protective instincts flaring. He was about to yell Kyle's name when he stopped, frozen by what he saw. Leo stood up and brushed the dirt from his pants. He looked at Kyle, not with anger or fear, but with a look of intense, clinical curiosity. It was the same look he'd had when he was fixing the toaster. He was looking at a problem to be solved. "Your body is an inefficient system," Leo said, his voice carrying across the playground eerily clear. "Your circulatory pressure is unstable." Kyle laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "What are you talking about, freak?" He took a step closer, raising his fist. Leo didn't move. He just stared at Kyle's face. Tom saw Leo's eyes narrow slightly. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift. And then Kyle Peters screamed. He clutched his nose, stumbling backward. Dark, red blood began to pour from his nostrils, a sudden and shocking torrent. It wasn't a trickle. Teachers came running. The other kids stood frozen, staring. Tom's blood ran cold. Leo hadn't touched him. He hadn't moved a muscle. He had just looked at him. In the ensuing chaos, Tom grabbed Leo's hand and pulled him away. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice trembling. Leo looked up at him, his expression one of mild surprise. "I didn't do anything," he said. "I just saw it." The vessel in his nose was weak. The pressure was too high. It was going to happen eventually. "I just thought about it happening now." "I just thought about it happening now." The words echoed in Tom's mind, a terrifying refrain. He looked at his son, at the small hand he was holding, and for the first time he felt a flicker of fear. Not for Leo, but of him. The incident was chalked up to a freak nosebleed. Kyle Peters had a history of them, his mother explained, flustered and embarrassed. But the kids on the playground had seen it. They had seen Leo stare. They had seen Kyle fall. The whispers started in earnest now. The story changed with each telling, but the core of it remained. Leo Milburn was weird, and maybe he was dangerous. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, the blueprint-like drawing Leo had made spread out before him. The map for a cage. He traced the impossible lines with his finger, feeling a sense of dread so profound it was almost physical. He remembered what Leo had said in the yard. "They're watching." On a desperate impulse, he went to the back door and stepped out into the cool night air. The yard was empty. The world was quiet. He felt foolish. He was a grown man, scared of shadows and his own son's imagination. He was about to go back inside when a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods caught his eye. The woods bordered their backyard, a dark, dense wall of trees. Standing just inside the shadows, so still it was almost invisible, was a figure. It was tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head too large and smooth. It was grey, the color of twilight and dust. It had no discernible features from this distance, just a shape that was fundamentally wrong. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a man. It was one of them. Tom's heart seized in his chest. He couldn't breathe. The thing in the woods wasn't moving. It was just standing there, observing. It knew he was looking. He could feel its attention on him, a cold, weightless pressure. He thought of the nosebleed. He thought of the nosebleed. He thought of the toaster. He thought of the drawing. This was not his imagination. This was real. The thing in the woods was the proof. They hadn't just left something inside his son. They were monitoring their experiment. Tom Milburn and his son were in a terrarium, and something was watching them from the other side of the glass. He backed away slowly, his hand fumbling for the doorknob, never taking his eyes off the silent grey sentinel at the edge of the woods. The grey man, as Tom started calling him in his head, was not always there, but he was there often enough. A flicker of movement at the tree line when Tom took out the trash. A tall, thin shadow in the reflection of a storefront window when he was in town. A momentary stillness in the woods on his drive to the mill that was just too still, too deliberate to be a tree. Tom never saw him clearly. It was always a glimpse, a peripheral trick of the light that resolved into a terrifying shape for a split second before vanishing. But he knew. He felt the observation like a change in air pressure. It was a constant, low-level hum of dread beneath the surface of his daze. He tried to talk to Leo about it. "Do you still see them?" he asked one afternoon, trying to sound casual. "The watchers?" Leo was sitting on the living room floor, disassembling the television remote with a screwdriver from Tom's toolbox. He had laid out all the components on a rag in a neat, ordered pattern. "They're not watching me," Leo said without looking up. "They're watching what I'm going to do. They're afraid." "Afraid of what?" Tom pressed. "Afraid of you." Leo finally looked up. His eyes, once the simple blue of a summer sky, now seemed to hold the cold, deep blue of a winter ocean. "They're afraid of everyone," he said. "Of you, of Mrs. Gable, of the man at the gas station. You are all the same. I am just the one who's awake." The word sent a chill through Tom. He looked at the disemboweled remote control, the tiny circuits and buttons arranged with surgical precision. Leo wasn't just taking it apart. He was studying it, learning. The changes in Leo were accelerating. He no longer read children's books. Tom found him one evening with the family's old desktop computer, the one that had been gathering dust in the closet. The screen was filled with scrolling lines of code. "What are you doing?" Tom asked, his voice hoarse. "The internet is inefficient," Leo said, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that should have been impossible. "Information is disorganized. It's like a library where all the books have been thrown on the floor. I am building a better way to sort it." Tom didn't understand the code, but he understood the intensity. He understood that his son was now operating on a level so far beyond him that he could no longer even pretend to keep up. He was a stranger in his own house, living with a mind that was becoming less and more than human with each passing day. The fear of the grey man in the woods began to compete with a new fear. The fear of what Leo was becoming. Was the boy he knew still in there? the boy who loved dinosaur pancakes and was scared of thunderstorms? Or was that person being slowly overwritten like old data on a hard drive? One night the fear became too much. Tom had a nightmare. He was on the road again, but this time when the pale light came, it didn't just take his memory, it took Leo. He watched the grey figures lead his son away into a silent silver ship. He screamed and screamed, but made no sound. He woke up gasping for air, his t-shirt soaked in sweat. The house was silent. He needed to see him. He needed to see his son was still there. He got out of bed and went to Leo's room. The door was ajar. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating Leo's bed. It was empty. Panic, cold and absolute gripped Tom. He stumbled into the room, his mind racing. Had they taken him? Had the grey man finally stepped out of the woods? Then he saw him. Leo was not gone. He was standing by the window, looking out into the backyard. He was perfectly still. "Leo," Tom whispered. Leo turned, his face was calm in the moonlight. "It's okay, Dad," he said, his voice soft. "You had a bad dream." Tom's relief was so intense it almost buckled his knees. "How did you know?" "I heard you," Leo said. "I didn't make a sound," Tom said, confused. "Not out loud," Leo clarified. He pointed to his own head. "I heard you in here. You were scared." He walked over to Tom and for the first time in weeks took his hand. His touch was cool. "You don't have to be scared of them. They can't hurt us." Tom knelt down, looking into his son's eyes. "Leo, what's happening to you?" Leo's expression shifted. The momentary flicker of the comforting child was gone, replaced by that chilling ancient wisdom. "I am waking up," he said, "and I am starting to understand the dream I had in their ship." He squeezed Tom's hand. "It wasn't a dream, Dad. It was a preview." "Tell me about the dream," Tom said. They were sitting at the kitchen table. It was 3 a.m, the world outside dark and silent. The house felt like the only place in the universe. Tom had made them both hot chocolate, a desperate grasp at a normalcy that had long since shattered. Leo held his mug, staring into it just as he had on that first night. But now he spoke. His voice was steady, unnervingly adult. It was as if he were reciting a history lesson he had not learned, but remembered. "It wasn't pictures at first," he began. "It was feelings. A big, big feeling. Like when you stand in the middle of a field and you know a storm is coming. That feeling. But everywhere. All of space was like that, full of noise. And fear. And waste." Tom listened, his own mug forgotten. Waste. It was such a strange word for a child to use. "The people. My people, us." Leo corrected himself. "We got tired of the noise. We got tired of the waste. Other kinds of life, they just grew. Like weeds, messy, no plan. They fought. They died, they used up stars and planets, and didn't build anything that lasted. It was all for temporary." He took a sip of his hot chocolate. "So we fixed it. We went out. We brought order." "What kind of order, Leo?" Tom asked, his voice a dry whisper. Leo looked up from his mug and for a second, Tom felt like he was looking into the eyes of a general, a king, an emperor. "The quiet kind," Leo said. "We found worlds with singing crystals that chimed with the orbits of their moons. A beautiful song, but it served no purpose. So we harvested the crystals. We used their resonant frequencies to build better communication networks for our ships." Tom felt sick. "You destroyed their song." We preserved it, Leo said, a hint of impatience in his voice. We recorded it, but a song can't power a fleet. It's simple logic. We found beings made of gas and light, who had debated philosophy for 1,000,000 years. They had no answers, just more questions. An endless, inefficient loop. We offered them a choice: join our consciousness and contribute, or be dispersed. Their light was useful for terraforming. The mundane horror of it was breathtaking. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't malice. It was cold, cosmic utility. It was the same logic that had fixed the toaster. The song was the burnt side of the bread. The philosophers were the faulty heating element. All of it. Fixed. Corrected. And in the dream, Tom asked, his throat tight, what about me? What about us here on Earth? Earth was the heart, Leo said, a strange fondness in his voice. The cradle. It was kept perfect. A museum. A garden. No one suffered. No one was hungry. No one was sick. Everything was managed. Everything was safe. Because out there, he waved a small hand towards the ceiling, towards the stars. We were making it safe for them. We were taking all the chaos and turning it into peace. The peace of a graveyard, Tom breathed. Leo frowned, a flicker of genuine confusion on his face. Graveyards are for dead things, Dad. Nothing was dead. It was just repurposed, made useful, made part of the pattern. Don't you see? It was beautiful. A whole galaxy working together. No more pain, no more fear. Just a single, perfect purpose. Suddenly, Tom couldn't take it anymore. He reached across the table and grabbed Leo's small shoulders. Leo, listen to me. That's not you. That's them. That's something they put in your head. He was shouting, his voice echoing in the small kitchen. He was desperate to see a flicker of his own son, the boy who cried when he scraped his knee. For a terrifying moment, Leo's face went utterly blank. His eyes seemed to lose focus, looking through Tom, through the house, into an infinite distance. The air in the room grew cold. Tom felt a pressure in his skull, a building hum. Then an image bloomed in Tom's mind. It wasn't a memory. It was sharp, vivid, and real. He was standing on the bridge of a starship, a vast, angular cavern of dark metal. Through a viewport, he saw a nebula swirling with impossible colors, and he felt a sense of profound, unshakable peace, a sense of purpose. He saw a fleet of 1,000 ships, his ships, moving in perfect silent formation. He gave a mental command, not with words but with pure intent. Cleanse it. Sterilize the system. The stellar radiation is unstable. It presents a future risk. And he felt nothing but the satisfaction of a job well done. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Tom gasping, his hands still clutching his son's shoulders. He staggered back, falling into his chair. He had just felt it, the cold peace, the absolute certainty. Leo was watching him, his head tilted. Now you see, he said, his voice soft again. It's not scary, is it? It's just better. Tom stared at his son, the child he loved more than his own life. The vision had not come from the aliens. It had come from Leo. His son had just reached into his mind and shown him the future. And the most terrifying part of it all was that for a single, horrifying second, Leo had been right. It had felt better. The gray man stepped out of the woods. It happened 2 nights after Leo had shown Tom the vision. Tom was in the backyard, unable to sleep, staring at the tree line where he had seen the figure before. He was half expecting it, half dreading it. This time there was no flicker, no peripheral trick. The being simply emerged from the shadows and walked silently into the dim light of the back porch. Tom froze. His every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab Leo, to barricade the door. But he was paralyzed by a strange sense of inevitability. This meeting was always going to happen. The alien, the observer, stopped about 20 feet away. It was taller than Tom had realized, maybe 7 feet, and so thin it looked like a sketch of a man drawn with a single gray pencil line. Its head was large and teardrop-shaped, with 2 enormous black liquid eyes. It had no discernible mouth or nose. It simply stood there, radiating an aura of ancient stillness. Tom's heart hammered against his ribs. He expected a weapon, a beam of light. Something. Instead, the observer just stood there. And then a voice spoke inside Tom's head. It wasn't a voice of words, but of pure meaning, of images and emotions, translated directly into his consciousness. "Do not be afraid, Tom Milburn." The voice was calm, patient, and tinged with a deep cosmic sadness. "What do you want?" Tom managed to say out loud, his own voice sounding rough and alien to him. "We made a mistake," the observer communicated. "We have a protocol for emerging species. We observe, we catalog. We do not interfere. It is the highest law." The being showed Tom an image of a vast galactic council, beings of 1,000 different forms, all agreeing on this one principle. It was a law born of ancient catastrophic wars. "But we have never encountered a potentiality like this," the thought continued. "Your species, the paradox, your capacity for selfless love is intertwined with your capacity for total annihilation. One cannot exist without the other. In most of you, it remains a dormant conflict, a balance. In your child, the balance has been broken." An image flashed in Tom's mind, a set of scales. On one side, a heart. On the other, a burning sun. In Leo, the scales were tipping. "What did you do to him, Em?" Tom demanded, taking a half step forward. "Nothing," the observer insisted, and Tom felt the pure truth of the statement. That is the terror. We did nothing. The scan, our brief presence, it was merely a catalyst, a spark on dry tinder. The potential was already there. Ixinki is not possessed, he is heathenoriting. The observer showed Tom another vision, not of fleets and conquest, but of Earth. He saw Leo, a man now beloved by all. He had cured every disease. He had solved the energy crisis. He had ended war and hunger. Humanity was united, peaceful and prosperous, all looking to this one benevolent genius as their leader. The world was a paradise. "This is how it will begin," the mental voice explained. "With goodness, with a genuine desire to end suffering, he will make your world perfect, but it will not be enough." And with their world so perfect, so ordered, they would feel a profound, righteous duty to share that order, to fix the rest of the galaxy, to save it from itself. "He will not be a tyrant," the observer communicated, a wave of sorrow washing over Tom. "He will be a savior, and that is infinitely more dangerous. A tyrant can be overthrown, but who would rise up against a god who gives them everything they desire?" The final terrible truth settled into Tom's bones. The aliens weren't here to hurt them. They were here because they were terrified of what humanity would willingly, joyfully become. "Why are you telling me this?" Tom asked, the words catching in his throat. The observer took a slow step closer. Its large black eyes seemed to hold the light of dying stars. Because you are the fulcrum, the father. The paradox exists in you as well. Your love for your child is absolute. But you have now seen what that child will do to the children of 10,000 other worlds. An image formed in Tom's mind. A simple choice, presented without threat or coercion. It was a picture of Leo, his son, playing happily in a sunlit field, safe and loved. Next to it, a picture of a silent silver ship descending. We cannot interfere directly. The observer's thought was heavy with meaning. The law is absolute. We cannot take him. But you can give him to us. The offer hung in the cold night air. We will not harm him, the alien promised, showing Tom an image of a world, a sanctuary, where Leo's mind could expand without endangering others. A place where he would be studied, understood, and, true, contained. He would not be a prisoner, but he would never be free to enact his terrible, beautiful vision. You want me to give you my son, Tom whispered, the horror of the choice crashing down on him. We want you to save the future, the observer corrected gently, from the love of your own child. The house was quiet, but for Tom, the universe was screaming. He stood in the living room, the observer gone as silently as it had appeared, leaving behind a choice that felt like a physical weight on his soul. Save his son, or save everything else. He walked down the hall and stood in the doorway of Leo's room. The boy was asleep, curled on his side, his face soft and innocent in the dim glow of the nightlight. One hand was tucked under his cheek. He looked small, fragile. He was just a little boy, his little boy. Tom's mind reeled. He remembered the day Leo was born, the terrifying, overwhelming wave of love he'd felt when the nurse placed that tiny, screaming bundle in his arms. He remembered teaching him to walk, the scraped knees, the piggyback rides. He remembered Leo's first word, Dada, and how his own heart had felt like it would burst. How could he give that up? How could any father? It was a monstrous thought, to willingly hand his child over to them, to aliens, to a life of sterile containment on some unknown world, a million light years away. It was a betrayal of every instinct he possessed. He would be condemning his son to a life of loneliness. Leo would never go to the prom, never learn to drive, never fall in love, never have children of his own. Tom would be stealing his entire life from him. But then, the other images flooded his mind, the ones the observer and Leo himself had shown him. The worlds of glass, the silent, empty star systems, the repurposed species, their songs and philosophies erased in the name of efficiency. The children of 1,000 other worlds who would never be born, because humanity, led by his son's benevolent logic, had decided their existence was inefficient. He walked back to the kitchen and sat down, his head in his hands. He felt like he was being torn in two. One half of him was the father, screaming, "Protect him at all costs." The other half was the man who had been shown a glimpse of the abyss, whispering, "You have to stop him." He thought about running, just packing a bag, grabbing Leo and driving, disappearing, changing their names. But where could they go? Leo wasn't just a smart kid anymore, he was something else. Something that was growing, changing, becoming more powerful. The nosebleed, the telepathy. How long before he could do more? How do you hide from a boy who can read your mind? How do you hide from a power that would eventually reshape the world around him, whether he wanted it to or not? The observer's words came back to him. He will not be a tyrant. He will be a savior. That was the core of it. Leo wasn't evil. The thing inside him wasn't evil. It was just alien in its logic. It saw suffering and wanted to fix it. It saw chaos and wanted to bring order. And its tools for fixing and ordering were terrifyingly absolute. Tom got up and started pacing the small house, from the kitchen to the living room and back again. A caged animal. He looked at the family photos on the mantel. A picture of him and his late wife Sarah holding a baby Leo. Sarah had died 2 years ago, a sickness that the doctors couldn't fix. What would Leo, the future Leo, have done about that? He would have fixed it. He would have rewritten her biology, eliminated the disease. He would have saved her. He would save everyone from that pain. The temptation of it was a sweet poison, a world without cancer, without heartbreak, without loss, a world his son would build. But what was the price? He stopped in front of Leo's drawing, the map for a cage, still taped to the refrigerator. He had thought it was a cage for the aliens. Now he wondered. Maybe it was an cage for something else entirely. Maybe it was a cage for the universe itself. A perfect, orderly, inescapable prison designed by a 7-year-old boy in Harmony Creek. He looked out the window at the dark woods. The observer had told him how. If he chose, he was to take Leo to the clearing on the old logging road, the place where it had all begun. He was to do it at dawn on the 3rd day. That was 2 days from now. He felt a profound sense of isolation, deeper than any he had ever known. He was a lumber mill worker from a forgotten town, and he held the fate of the galaxy in his hands, and every possible choice was a nightmare. He could keep his son and condemn the universe, or he could save the universe and condemn his son. He went back to Leo's room and watched him sleep. A tear slid down Tom's cheek and fell onto the worn wooden floor. It made no sound. In the crushing silence of the house, Tom Milburn, the father, began to wrestle with the gods and monsters in his heart. The 2nd day was an agony of indecision. Tom tried to act normal for Leo's sake and for his own. He took him to the park. He pushed him on the swings. The rhythmic creak of the chains, a maddening metronome counting down the seconds of his choice. Leo was quiet, distant. He seemed to know a decision was weighing on his father. He didn't ask, but Tom felt his son's mind gently brushing against his own, not reading his thoughts, but sensing the turmoil within. It was a soft, inquisitive pressure, like a hand on his shoulder. It made Tom feel even more trapped. "I love you, you know that, right?" Tom said suddenly, his voice thick with emotion. They were sitting on a park bench, watching the ducks in the pond. Leo looked at him. The cold, ancient intelligence was still in his eyes, but for a moment it was veiled by something else. The simple, trusting love of a child for his parent. "I know, Dad," he said. "I love you too." That small, simple phrase was like a knife in Tom's gut. It made the observer's choice feel obscene, impossible. This was his son, his boy. But later that afternoon, the balance shifted again. Tom was trying to fix a leaky faucet in the bathroom, his frustration growing with every stripped screw and stubborn pipe. He cursed, banging his wrench against the porcelain sink, leaving a small chip. Leo appeared in the doorway. He watched Tom for a moment. "You are angry," he stated. "I am frustrated," Tom grumbled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This stupid thing won't cooperate." "Anger is an inefficient response to a mechanical problem," Leo said, his voice taking on the flat, analytical tone that Tom had come to dread. "It wastes energy and increases the probability of error, like damaging the sink." Tom stopped, wrench in hand. It's normal to get frustrated, Leo. People get angry. It's part of being human. It's a flaw, Leo countered, stepping into the bathroom. A bug in the system. Emotion clouds judgment. If you approached the problem logically, you would see the corrosion on the valve seating requires a solvent application, not increased torque. He pointed a small finger at the pipe. The problem isn't the faucet, it's your approach. Tom stared at him. It wasn't what Leo said, it was how he said it. The complete dismissal of Tom's feelings. The reduction of a human moment of frustration into a bug in the system. He saw, in that small bathroom, the seed of the Galactic Empire. He saw the logic that would dismantle a culture because it was inefficient. He saw the mind that would disperse a species of sentient gas because they were a flaw. This thing, this cold cosmic reason, was not just an addition to his son. It was consuming him. It was replacing the messy, emotional, flawed humanity of the boy he knew, with a perfect, terrifying clarity. That night, Tom made his decision. He sat at the kitchen table long after Leo had gone to bed, the house wrapped in a profound silence. He wasn't crying anymore. He felt hollowed out, a man made of ash. He thought of Sarah, his wife. He wondered what she would do. And he knew. She would have seen the same thing. She would have seen the boy they loved slipping away, being replaced by something vast and cold. She would have chosen the lesser of two impossible griefs. He would not be condemning his son. He would be saving him, saving what was left of the little boy from the God that was growing inside him. Maybe in that sanctuary the observer had shown him they could help him. Maybe they could separate the boy from the power. Maybe they could give him back his childhood. It was a faint, desperate hope, but it was all he had. He was not saving the galaxy from his son. He was saving his son from the galaxy. He went to his bedroom and pulled an old shoebox from the top of his closet. Inside were photos that weren't on the mantle. A picture of Leo on his 3rd birthday, his face smeared with chocolate cake. A picture of him asleep in the backseat of the car, his head at an awkward angle. A picture of the two of them at the beach, squinting into the sun. He took one photo out. It was of him and Leo, taken just a few months ago at the county fair. They were both smiling. A real smile from before the light on the road, before the lines, and the watchers and the cold, awful logic. He tucked the photo into his pocket. He would give it to them. He would make them take it, so that Leo, wherever he was going, would have it. So he would remember the man on the beach, the flawed, frustrated, loving man who was his father. He looked at the clock. It was almost dawn. The 3rd day had come. The old Ford pickup started. Tom wasn't surprised. He had a chilling certainty that anything he needed to accomplish his task would simply work. The universe was bending to this moment. He went into Leo's room. The boy was already awake, sitting up in bed, dressed in his jeans and a sweatshirt. He looked at Tom, and his expression was one of solemn understanding. There were no questions. "It's time, isn't it?" Leo asked, his voice a quiet whisper. Tom could only nod, his throat too tight for words. "It's okay, Dad," Leo said, and in that moment he was just a boy, trying to comfort his father. "It's better this way. I am too loud. Inside. Too loud." That was what it felt like to have the future of galactic domination blooming in your 7-year-old mind. Tom knelt by the bed, and for the last time, he hugged his son. He held him tight, trying to memorize the feeling of his small frame, the smell of his hair. He was holding a ghost. He was holding a memory. The drive to the clearing on the old logging road was silent, the same road where it had all started. Dawn was breaking, painting the eastern sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange. It was beautiful and terrible. Tom parked the truck where the engine had died all those weeks ago. He got out and opened the passenger door. He took Leo's hand. It felt very small in his. Together, they walked into the clearing, a wide circular space of flattened grass and pine needles. The air was still and cold. They stood in the center waiting. Tom looked down at Leo, who was staring up at the sky, his face tilted, expectant. There was no fear in him, only a strange, sad resignation. Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph from the fair. He knelt in front of Leo and pushed it into his son's hand. "Don't forget me," Tom whispered, his voice finally breaking. "Don't you ever forget me." Leo looked at the picture, at the two smiling faces, and then back up at Tom. "A part of you will always be a part of me," he said with a wisdom that broke his father's heart. "The inefficient part, the part I will miss." And then it came. There was no sound, no roar of engines. The light just began to grow, a soft, pearlescent glow descending from the sky. It was not frightening, it was serene. A massive, silent silver ship materialized above them, blotting out the dawn. It was shaped like a smooth river stone, impossibly large, impossibly graceful. A ramp extended from the bottom, touching the ground without a sound. At the top of the ramp, a single figure appeared. The gray man, the observer. Leo let go of Tom's hand. He started walking towards the ramp, clutching the photograph. He didn't look back. Tom stood rooted to the spot, watching his entire world walk away from him. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to grab his son, to fight. But he stood still. He had made his choice. He was a man holding back a tide with his own broken heart. At the top of the ramp, Leo stopped and turned. He looked at Tom one last time. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just looked. And in his eyes, Tom saw a flicker of it. The boy. His Leo. A brief, silent, heartbreaking thank you. Then he turned and disappeared into the ship. The observer gave a slow, deliberate nod to Tom. It was not a gesture of thanks. It was a gesture of shared sorrow. Then it too retreated into the ship. The ramp retracted. The soft light intensified for a moment, and then, as silently as it had arrived, the ship was gone. The sky was empty again, save for the rising sun. Tom was alone in the clearing. The silence was absolute. It was the silence of a saved galaxy. It was the silence of a hollowed-out man. He sank to his knees on the damp earth, the place where it all began, and now where it all ended. The sun rose higher, casting long shadows from the trees, but for Tom Milburn, the world had just gone dark. And in the quiet dawn of Harmony Creek, the man who had saved the universe from his own son began the simple, impossible task of learning how to live in an empty house.